And good day to you. It's a Wednesday, which means it's a legal beagle day. And on the line, as you can see, we have our good friend David Dewar. It doesn't look like it's as cold in Cape Town as it is in Joburg, my good friend.
It's different cold.
Is it?
We don't have the temperature cold. We've got the wind cold and we've got the rain cold.
Yes.
So it's different cold,
Yeah.
but it's
Well,
definitely winter.
it's
That is for
definitely,
sure.
and we've passed summer solstice, and well, without sort of diverting too much, I want to say that every single member in the Springbok squad that's on the bench would make any international side for Saturday. So we look forward to that, don't we? But we're not going to get into our sport jargon now.
Oh, absolutely.
So today we're going to talk about the Matrimonial Property Act. Because there've been some changes, Dave. So can we just start by just explaining to the viewers what are the ways? Essentially, it's basically three ways that one can get married in terms of the contract.
Yeah, that's true. The default position in South Africa is to be married in community of property. The deviation from this is where one has an antenuptial contract in place. And with the antenuptial contract in place, you either agree to separate your estates. So what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, and there's a concrete barrier in between, and nothing crosses that barrier. Or we have an accrual, or we include the accrual system, which, as far as I know, is the only such system in the world. And what happens under the accrual system is that we share the profits of the marriage equally. So if one party comes in and, after you take their starting value and move it forward with inflation, they then make a 10 million rand profit, and the other party after inflation makes a 5 million rand profit. The party who made a 10 million rand profit has to give 2.5 million rand to the other party so that they both make a 7.5 million rand profit out of the marriage.
Essentially,
That's the simplest definition or explanation.
yes. So we've got accrual with accrual and without accrual. A lot of people might turn around and say, "Well, okay,
Yes.
so what is then what's it out of community?" And that's just when each partner, doesn't matter what you had before, what you've got during, it's 50-50. So that would differ from the ANC with accrual, um, because the accrual wouldn't take into account the assets that you had before you got married, unless you stipulated so. Would that be a correct sort of explanation?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, very completely correct. So
Okay.
those, I'm assuming what you were alluding to when you said three ways of getting married was in community of property, out of community of property, and out of community of property with the accrual system. Just to be clear,
100%.
to be clear, to be clear, to be clear.
So,
It's a bit like being sure to be sure to be sure.
to be
Clear,
sure, to
not
be
sure, clear.
sure. So, so
Right.
are there any other ways? And obviously, here, what I want you to touch on is the much debated if I stay with my partner for 2 years or 10 years or 20 years,
Mm.
once you get through a period, it's automatic. That's the one thing I want you to just explain quickly and debunk. And the other one, of course, which is very relevant in South Africa, is customary marriages.
Yes, I was about to say, what we've been discussing so far are those marriages that fall under the Matrimonial Property Act.
Yeah.
You've got the Civil Unions Act, um, which is for gay marriages. You have customary marriages, which also have their own act. And then, as you say, you've got what people refer to as common law husband and wife. And in South Africa, there's no such thing. And you can be living
There we
together
go.
for 25 years. You do not create a marriage. It just does not exist. The closest we get to a common law husband and wife is where what we call a universal partnership, where you take all your things, you toss all your things into the same pot, and you both share the profits from whatever is in that pot. That has to be proved that you've got that situation before you can actually claim from it. So you have to prove that partnership before you can start claiming from your, I guess at that stage, former partner's assets. It's not
Right.
a great position. And what I will
Not
also
a good
say,
one at all.
just to quickly digress while we're on this topic, um, what we find is that very often people say, no, no, we don't want to get married because we don't want that kind of commitment. We think it's better to be committed like this because, you know, when one can walk away and you decide to stay, that's a stronger commitment than committing to marriage. Okay, it's a perspective. I'm not going to knock it or agree with it because it's not the point I want to make. The point I want to make is that if you do that and you choose to not go the way of marriage, you give up a lot of the rights that are put into the law to protect spouses. So, for example, if you inherit from your spouse in terms of deceased estate, that is not subject to estate duty. Uh, if you divorce and the property, half the property or the whole property is transferred from one property party to the other, or there's an endorsement for those who are married in community of property, that too is exempt from estate duty. And despite what everyone says, it's not the attorneys who make the money out of property transfers, SARS, the government. On a 5 million rand property, your legal fees, you're probably looking at about 60,000 rand. Your transfer duty is about 300,000 rand, if not more. So it's a very, very different picture. And if you can avoid that, well, you need to consider it.
Yeah.
There are also other protections, but again, we don't want to go too far down that wormhole. Yeah, that's
Because
the
what we want to
situation with the
do,
different marriages, customary unions, civil unions, no such thing as common law husband and wife.
no such thing. And then we've recently had a change, which throws a whole lot again, another cat amongst the pigeons, so to speak. Do you want to touch on that, please, Dave, and explain to our Masakinis and Mensa how it's going to affect the Act?
So what's happening now, there's an amendment that's been brought forward to which will have an impact of people married out of community of property, where if the parties and this comes from a situation that took place on a farm a couple of years ago. I can't remember the name of the parties off the top of my head. But what happened was that they were married out of community of property. She lived on the farm with him. She helped him, grow the business that was the farm, make lots and lots of money. And then when they divorced, his attitude was, well, you were married out of community of property with no accrual. Take the shirt on your back and off you go. That's it. You get nothing. Now that just it doesn't sit well,
Wait,
does it?
wait,
It
wait.
doesn't
I
seem
just want to say
fair.
something.
It doesn't seem right.
Bastard. Okay, you can carry on.
Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, it's just unconscionable conduct, isn't it? So that got to the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court said, no, you were not having this situation because they'd requested a redistribution agreement because at the end of the day, she had devoted oh, I can't remember how long it was, but 20, 30, 40 years of her life to help him build his business and his estate and his assets. And then to walk away with nothing. Yeah, I don't even think she got a salary for it. She probably just got a stipend of, 5,000 rand a month. Here you go, here's some pocket money, and a roof over her head. So no, it doesn't sit well at all. It's just not
So what
fair.
happened?
So that then was ruled so the court did a redistribution agreement or redistribution of assets, and they ruled that that kind of situation has to be unconstitutional, and that's given rise to a new amendment to the marriage laws, along with regularizing them and including all marriages under one marriage act. I mean, the situation we've got with Islamic marriages, we call them Christian marriages in terms of the Matrimonial Property Act, traditional marriages, civil unions, they're all marriages. So I think it's a great thing that they're regularizing all of it and bringing it all under one umbrella. So there's only one law that governs the whole situation. And this, I don't know if this is going to be specifically included in that, but it's going to be included in that matrimonial legislation. So what will happen then is if you have a situation like this, the courts are empowered to do a redistribution. It doesn't mean that the accrual itself falls away and you share everything 50-50. No, this is in cases where you have one party who's been abused by the other party. So if one party earns 10 million rand a year and the other party earns 500,000 rand a year, but they're both earning and they're both generating, they're both putting into the household, it's not likely to happen in that situation. It has to be, from what I understand, an abusive situation, where someone has just contributed completely to the other party's estate, got no benefit from it. And when I say benefit, um, it would be, so for example, giving up your earning to raise the children. Taking a half-day job so that you can spend the afternoon looking after the children and the household, spending your time working in your spouse's business and developing their business. Those kind of things are taken as contributions to the marriage. If you've got someone who sits at home and doesn't contribute to the marriage, they're not going to benefit because they can't show that they've contributed, which is also not fair. Why should they benefit if they haven't contributed to the marriage? No, you have to be contributing. And of course, and it does always come back to money, doesn't it? It's an easy
Yeah.
way to measure what someone's been doing.
Wow. So even if one is married with accrual, and the woman decides she just wants to park off at home and be supported, it can work the other way around as well. It can basically she can be penalized because she didn't contribute to
Yeah,
the marriage.
absolutely. Yeah,
Wow. So we've
yes.
had a test
That is
case,
one of those.
and
That is already that situation is actually already part of our law. It's called forfeiture. It sits there. It looked as though it was going to be knocked off the books because the courts didn't really want to enforce it. And then there was a recent case where it was enforced. So it does sit there. It sits in both the Matrimonial Property Act and the Divorce Act that if someone, if their sole conduct has caused the breakdown of the marriage, they cannot participate in the other party's accrual. So that would apply, for example, in the situation where one party picks up a drug habit. And I don't think I have to tell you, in our modern world, that's not a difficult
yeah,
thing to do. And before you know
yeah,
it, you've sold your car, you've sold your house, you've gambled away absolutely everything that you've got. You've got people knocking on your door wanting money for that you borrowed from them to go and get high. And that, it's catastrophic. So why must the other party then shell out their hard-earned money to compensate someone who's behaved like that? So
that's
that
excellent.
does exist in our books already, and it's good.
Excellent. Dave, just before we say goodbye to the viewers, um, can I ask you, what would it cost? You've got a couple, they want to get married. We always advise to enter into a contract of your choice, but enter into a contract. What's the average cost for someone to enter into a contract, an
Oh
ANC?
gosh. Um, yeah, an ANC, you're looking at about, I'm going to say to you about 4 to 5 thousand rand because you must remember that you have costs in terms of getting it registered in the deeds office because it has to be
Yeah,
registered before it's enforceable against third parties. Uh, Other contracts, they're going to be longer, and depending on what you're looking at anything between, call it 5,000 rand through to, gosh, probably about 20, depending on how complex it gets. Um,
right, right.
I mean, there are obviously
But
there are commercial contracts that go well beyond that price because there's a lot more that's going to go into them and a lot of time negotiating backwards and forwards. But for something like that, I would imagine that sort of ballpark. I would also advise anyone who buys a property together. make sure that you've got some sort of contract in terms of who pays for what and what you do if the relationship falls apart or the relationship ends. And it can end by death, make no mistake. It doesn't have to be by a breakup of the relationship. Because if you
Right.
own a property and you get one of the parties dies, touch wood, we don't wish that on anyone, you still have to decide what to do with that property. Does someone have the right to stay on there? Does it have to get sold immediately? Do they have the right to buy out the other party? Did they put life insurances in place to protect each other for those buyouts? Because you're looking at a fair sum of money that you've got to now come up with.
Right.
And you've just lost
Yeah.
your partner who produces half the money for the household. So now you've got to pick up all of their costs that they've been paying, and you don't have that extra income. So I would also recommend if you buy a house with two people, or any asset for that matter, you make sure that you've got life insurance, key man life insurance, and that's your area, because you will
Yes.
need it. And it's only when you don't have insurance and you need it that you realize its value. Everyone thinks it's a grudge
I get
purchase.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Breaks my heart.
yeah,
Breaks my heart.
um, yeah. I know someone who had a car accident the other day at 50 kilometers an hour, but the damage to the car was such that it's written off. It's a brand new vehicle. It's written off.
Oh, God.
Fortunately,
And no
they're
insurance.
insured. No, they're insured. Um,
Ah,
so
excellent.
because it's insured, there's a 6,000 Rand excess versus a 400,000 Rand debt.
That's it.
You know, six six
Well,
thousand
Dave,
Rand
thank you very
excess, that's
much.
cheap at the price.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic information and good knowledge
Yeah,
for
always.
our viewers. And I thank you again for your time. And again, I will put your website in the video under the description. If anyone wants to get hold of you, they can just go via your website and they can get hold of you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a second website, www.anccontract.co.za, if they want to know more about the three different marriage types that we were talking about. We do also touch on traditional marriages and civil unions there as well, because you can actually have an ANC for either of those if you want to. So we do
Okay,
deal with it there. And I would recommend that as just good reading.
excellent. Well, thanks for your time, peeps. We'll chat next week again with Dave. And in the meantime, God bless you. Um, don't make any silly mistakes. We are so smart because we've made so many mistakes. And as I always say, use the brain that the good Lord gave you and have a wonderful week further. Thank you, Dave.